Thank you everyone for joining us today. If we haven't connected before, my name is Kelly and I am the founder and executive director of Impact Travel Alliance. Impact Travel Alliance is the world's largest community for socially and eco-conscious travelers, and our vision as a nonprofit organization is to empower travelers with the resources and knowledge that they need to explore our world in a way that has a positive impact on local communities and our environment. Today, we are talking about a very hot topic. We've already seen a lot of buzz about this behind the scenes in our Facebook group. So I'm really excited to dig into this topic. We're talking about reopening destinations and the ethics behind travel during the pandemic. This is the first in an ongoing series where we will look at different destinations, different regions, different topics and themes that are related to reopening destinations. But today we are going to be talking about the Caribbean. It's summertime. I know everyone has been quarantined and self-isolating, so a beach getaway sounds really, really good. And I am excited to pass this over to Dave and Lily, who are going to be leading today's session. Dave, you can go ahead and take it away. And you are muted. Hang on one moment.
Mute. Can you hear me? Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Hi, so my name is David Charles. I would like to, yes, I'm also part of ITA as well. I help to co-lead our media network, which is a network focused on supporting bloggers and content creators in the sustainable travel space. Today's topic is, as Kelly mentioned, very exciting: to go or not to go to specifically the Caribbean. So Lily and I will be talking about that and discussing lots of questions regarding that topic. It's not a simple answer. The Caribbean is a very diverse region, as many of you know. Lots of different countries, territories, destinations with different political organizations. So hopefully today, what we can help you with is to give you a sense of how to think about traveling ethically to the Caribbean, sort of in the world of COVID. We have potentially two audiences that might be interested in this, and so hopefully we'll be able to address that answer for individual travelers looking to learn more about how to travel to the Caribbean responsibly and ethically in the time of COVID, but then also to media, to the bloggers and journalists out there who want to write about this and want to speak to their audiences and give them the right advice. I'm personally here because I'm from the Caribbean originally. I'm from St. Lucia, so I still have lots of family and friends down there, and we talk about this probably on a daily basis. The issue is that's just one island, that's just one country, so I pretty much know a lot about sort of the response to COVID and to tourism down there. I don't know about the rest of the Caribbean as much as our guest here, Lily Girma, does, and so I'll pass it over to her to talk a little bit more about what she does. She's an expert in the Caribbean. But then also, before we get into talking about COVID, just to give the audience a sense of what it means to travel ethically and sustainably to the Caribbean, because I think it's important to get that level set before we then sort of layer on the added complication of coronavirus. So handing over to Lily.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Hit the nail on the head. You know, before we address the COVID situation, it's good to understand what impact travel looked like in the Caribbean before this pandemic. So if I'll just share my screen with you for a second. Yes, here it is. Can you see it?
I can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. So this is really a very quick, 5-minute snapshot to give you a sense of what sustainable tourism looked like in the Caribbean. Was it even in existence, and what were your options? So first, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am not of Caribbean direct descent, but I was born and raised in Africa, in Ethiopia and in Ivory Coast. However, over the years, I've been raised in numerous places, and the Caribbean became my home exactly 15 years ago. Some of you who are watching probably know my story already, but I was a corporate attorney before I decided to ditch the office and hit the road and start my blog, which was how it all began. So I've had about 12 years of full-time living in the region as a travel journalist, as a guidebook author, photographer, and some of my longer-term destinations have been Jamaica, Belize, the Dominican Republic, and Grenada. I am currently based in the Dominican Republic, and I have been for the last 4 years. And of course, I've visited much of the Greater Caribbean over the years as a journalist. And I've listed here some of the publications that my work has appeared in. But really what I want to say is that I started out like everybody else. You know, I went solo to an all-inclusive, and that's about 15 years ago. And I realized that that was not the way that I travel, and that there was so much more to the Caribbean. I was absolutely blown away and decided to, and had the privilege of being able to travel slow throughout many, many countries in the Caribbean and find my own sources of impact travel. So a lot of times, oh wait, I didn't hit sorry about that. There's a perception that continues for the Caribbean that it really is a mass tourism destination, you know, that it's all about all-inclusive resorts, cruises, watered down experiences, the kind of, you know, man-made tours where, you know, it's just created just to entertain the tourist and not really the reality on the ground. That image has persisted throughout the years, and to this day, in fact, even recently, I've received questions of, you know, I've always wanted to go to Caribbean, but for some reason I just hold back because I just don't know how to approach it in a more conscious manner. Oops, I keep hitting the wrong button here. Sorry. So yeah.
Okay.
So can you see it now? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So here we are. So against that background and that uncertainty of, you know, is it only mass tourism in the Caribbean? Well, actually in the last, you know, 8 to 10 years, sustainable tourism has been slowly but surely growing in various ways. You know, a lot of locally owned businesses popping up, a lot of locally crafted experiences that focus on heritage, the outdoors, you know, community-led tourism activities, and also a trend towards the lodging becoming greener. A lot of the independent hotels were really becoming conscious about, you know, the use of plastic, sourcing from local farms, and going solar. Now, that's still, you know, a very small percentage of the whole tourism picture in the Caribbean, but it really was encouraging. And over the last 15 years, I've been really privileged to see, you know, just the growth of the impact travel, which I used to have to dig really hard for. And then, you know, now it's becoming more, you know, more popular. So, so what were your options as a sustainable tourist pre-COVID in the Caribbean? You could definitely avoid the all-inclusive resorts. I mean, so many places to stay, you know, small lodges, small hotels, locally owned guest houses, even pop-up camping options, you know, nature spaces. Airbnb came and was a major disruptor in good and bad ways. But the good ways is that it really put more traveler money in locals' hands. And also opened up a whole world to people, you know, the local neighborhoods, and they just got to have a more immersive perception of the Caribbean beyond the resorts. And then, you know, even green sailing charters we're seeing popping up in the British Virgin Islands, where sailing is really big. You also had many more local tours, and this has been just a joy to experience, you know, food tours, cooking classes in locals' homes, history walks, you know, artist-led workshops and visits where you really get not just, you know, knowledge about the art, but also the history of the place, you know. And as we know, the Caribbean is very, has similar histories, but very distinct also per destination. And visits to farms, you know, organic farms that are regenerating the land from the past, you know, sugarcane devastation of sugarcane plantations. And then community-led tourism, which is becoming a little bit better known, or community-based tourism is another term. Homestays within communities, lodges that are run by groups of women, and so forth. And then environmentally as well, I mean, there's a lot of progress being made there. You have, you know, national parks that are offering cabins now, you know, if you're a hardcore birder, or you're a naturalist, you just want to hike, you don't really care about swimming pools and such, you could do that, for several days and then mix it up with the beach if you want. But that's really a great thing that's been happening. And guided hiking expeditions over several days, as well as days out on offshore keys where all you do is just explore the underwater, if you're a diver. Or snorkeler, and you're camping out on these idyllic spots and you're just basically engaging with nature. So there was a lot of that happening. It was very encouraging. And then let me hit the next. Oh yes, and then COVID hit. So COVID hit, and I think this thing skipped one of my slides. Yes.
Yeah.
But before COVID hit, and right before COVID hit, there was this, just in the last 2 years, especially after the twin hurricanes, the devastating, twin hurricanes, there was basically, the Caribbean was at a crossroads, and there's a major push and pull between the mass tourism side and the budding sustainable tourism side, and the effects of the damage on the environment was becoming much more obvious. Some of it not controlled, some of it not the Caribbean's fault, like climate change effects, sargassum on the beaches and so on. But some of it was caused by resort developments. All of the coastal erosion we're seeing is part of that. The water shortages in the surrounding communities. And unfortunately, that rapid growth of resorts had not stopped. In fact, it was growing, rapidly. Even in 2020, just more and more resorts. And so it was becoming even more important to be an impact traveler, when you go to Caribbean, and to know how you can avoid all of that and how you can, if you don't want to contribute to that, which I certainly don't, none of us do. So it's important because, as I put here quickly, and I know Dave will talk about that later, 13 of the most tourism dependent small islands in the world, 13 of them are in the Caribbean out of 20. And so that's what the picture looked like, and COVID just hit at the height of this, tension between the two sides. So that's what we're here for. We, put in some of my contacts, but you guys all have access to that on the website at Impact Travel. So
yeah, definitely look forward to the time when we can talk about just these main topics of sustainable tourism in the Caribbean. But unfortunately, I think we're living in a time now where a lot of that is just completely eclipsed by just even the most fundamental question is can I even go? Like, are the countries or territories or regions, destinations, even open to travelers? Most people know that the Caribbean is so diverse in terms of topography and sort of culture, et cetera. But you consider that these are more than 24 different destinations made up of several different countries. So what are you seeing in terms of what's open and what's not yet accessible?
Well, I want to start out by saying, David, that things change very rapidly. So as of today, I can tell you, sort of what's open and what the trends have been. And a lot has shifted really quickly because, as we know, the virus is still out there. So, the virus is still in the Caribbean. So we have 11 destinations open so far. Antigua, Barbuda, one of the first to open, Bahamas, Aruba, Barbados, Bermuda, Bonaire, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the USVIs. And then you'll see another group that are open, only to returning nationals, or only to Europe, or only to the Caribbean region. And those are places like Martinique and Guadeloupe Islands, which are French, part of France. Curacao, and then the Dutch side of Saint Martin, which is opening August 1st, right? So there are also others that are preparing to open. Turks and Caicos on July 22nd, Belize, very anticipated, August 15 reopening, and Dominica on August 7. So you've got a small group that've just been holding on until now. Yeah. And then there are those that remain completely closed with no idea of, we don't know when they're opening, and it's not because they have a lot of cases, it's just that they're choosing and they are able to remain closed. And those are St. Kitts and Nevis, Trinidad and Tobago, for example.
Mhm.
And I believe Guyana also is closed at this time. So things are changing very fast. And policies are changing very fast. Protocols are changing very fast. The Bahamas just shut down to the USA literally a few days
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. Saw that
They
in the
had a
news.
spike. Yeah, they had a spike after they opened. Puerto Rico just shut down just like that a few days after reopening because, again, spike, not worth the risk. And the Dominican Republic reopened July 1, literally a few days before a major presidential election. And 3 weeks later, we're on curfew again. So that's been sort of what's been happening. It's really shifting very quickly, and you can't predict
Yeah.
what's.
And so you mentioned something in your list, which actually poses a question. What does open actually mean? What are the factors to consider? Because open for one country or territory or region might look different than open for others. So what are the different things that we're looking for in terms of making that decision as to or tracking whether or not a destination is quote unquote open?
Well, that could mean open borders. It could mean open to certain people and not others. It could mean that it's open, but you've got quarantine requirements in place. It could be that hotels have reopened, but not the tours. And not the sites. For example, Jamaica's sites are still closed because what's happening is that the Caribbean is, most of the Caribbean is reopening in phases. So when they say, "Oh, we're open and come down," they're not really being, irresponsible and saying, "Oh, let's just do it the way we used to." No, it's all phased and it's all controlled. So you've got to really keep that in mind when you say, destinations are open. Well, that's a very broad statement. So you've really got to know what's open before you go and make that decision as well.
Yeah. So if somewhere's open and I can go, but what about,
because that because St. Lucia is open, but it's not fully open, right?
Yeah, so I think that it's, again, like you said, it's changing dramatically. St. Lucia's put a lot into making sure that folks that land on the island are safe to arrive. So they set up testing at the airport. Or at least some sort of controls at the airport. I think, we had this discussion yesterday because even I had sort of assumed that folks had to quarantine at their hotels, and there are only certain hotels as well that are open specifically to visitors. But now I think where they are now is you can only leave the hotel premises with an approved tour guide or a tour group or transportation company. So there are still restrictions. It's not a free-for-all once you land to be able to then just basically hop into your rental car and drive around the island, which as somebody who speaks to their family all the time about this, it's comforting to hear that there are some controls in place and then some balances is being struck between sort of opening the country back up to tourism dollars, but then also making sure that those sort of locals are able to be protected and stay safe to a certain extent. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So a question, so if I've decided, I see a destination is open, I can get a flight and I'm allowed to go, because I actually maybe I forgot to mention this, I actually live in New York City. I don't actually live in St. Lucia at the moment. So there may even be sort of limitations for where I can travel based on where I currently live. The question is, should I go? Should travelers go? There are lots of ethical and practical considerations to travel. What are the things that we should be considering as travelers once we have decided that we want to personally take a risk and travel?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question that's coming up a lot since the Caribbean reopened. I think that the very first consideration should be, according to the destination. And the people in that destination. So we just have to be a lot more conscious about where we're choosing to go and what the situation is there. So beyond even, I'm not talking about even COVID numbers, I'm talking about more of a holistic look at the, the dependence on tourism that this destination has, as well as the socio-political setting of this destination. So, governments are now having to balance the public health versus not having their economy go completely, down for longer than what it already has, because that's just a disaster, And
Absolutely.
so, as we know, Caribbean countries are hugely dependent on tourism still. Whether or not that should be the case is not really, I think, the argument to have now. I mean, I agree that there has to be another way in the future, but for now, that is the situation. And a lot of people are unemployed and need to get back to work, and the economy needs to start running again, and foreign exchange needs to come in again, right? So I think that the first aspect is to consider how dependent are these countries really?
So I did actually look that up and pulled a stat. You should be able to see that. Can you see this, this slide?
Yeah.
It's not very easy to see, unfortunately. I think the key takeaway here is these numbers may differ depending on the source. This is from a company called Statista, which does lots of demographic and economic based data and research. But this one just, I mean, if anything, just shows just how vastly different from island to island, or from region to region. I have to avoid saying island because Belize isn't an island, for instance. But from destination to destination, how much the reliance on tourism is. So Aruba, the black line is total contribution to GDP. You look up here, at least as far as Statista says, 73.6% based on tourism, and it goes as far down as 4.2%.
And I believe, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, absolutely.
I believe it's even higher in some cases, because this is probably not counting, all the cruise money that comes in and so forth. So
right.
The majority of even the members of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, as they were saying recently, they've had some great series of webinars. The great majority of these Caribbean destinations have over 50% dependence in terms of foreign.
I mean, I look at St. Lucia's number here; it's 40.7%. But I've seen other sources that say that it's as high as 65% of GDP. So absolutely, I take this, but definitely to show this diverse.
Up to 70 for Jamaica, 70%.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an incredibly important consideration, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, it's just one of the, this is the thing, right? As you said, there's not going to be a clear black and white answer. So but it's important for people to really understand what dependency means on tourism income. These are islands where the large majority of employment has been focused on tourism. Of course, there are other industries, and not all islands are even the same. So this is why, for example, the Dominican Republic doesn't just have a tourism industry. Yes, it's important, but it has numerous other, it has manufacturing, it has agricultural exports that are huge. Whereas if we're talking about the smaller island states, there's not much more else, And so the consideration becomes, okay, so there's that, right? And then there's what's the situation with COVID on the ground? What's the level of COVID at the moment on the ground? And you really have to look at that on a daily basis. I mean, this is something that changes all the time. And then how is the government handled the whole situation? Is there a tension between the government and the people on the ground? Do people want visitors or not really? As we know, government agenda and people agenda, two different things in the Caribbean.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this conversation with my family so much in terms of just the fear of when the news comes out and St. Lucia's open and you see that first American Airlines plane landing. I think there's this anxiety that's just bringing COVID into the country, where I think St. Lucia has managed to keep total cases down to about 23 through the entire pandemic, which is good. The country locked down fairly early, And I think there's this just anxiety that all that good work and all that hard work is going to just go out the window with. But then at the same time, you have all these folks that are dependent, and not just directly. I think also,
Right.
we were talking about this, yesterday, where people don't think supermarkets, for instance,
Yes.
supply wholesale food to
Farmers.
hotels, and farmers supply local provisions to hotels and guest houses. And so it's not even just the local dollars or dollars that are being spent with sort of local merchants, but it's the indirect impact that spreads through the economy. So it
Right.
really is, it's such a tough balance to think about.
And I think we've come to a point where we also really need to know the geography of places much better.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that people are generally being very defensive and saying, well, that's irresponsible to travel right now. It's irresponsible for you to go to the Caribbean right now. But I think that regardless of what you and I think, there are people who are going to be traveling.
Yeah.
So the important thing is really to arm them with the right information to make those decisions and to really not create worse situations for those destinations. So that begins with really knowing, what is happening on the ground beyond the COVID numbers. How's the government running? How are the people seeing this? Read the outlets, see what's happening there. Also, situations are very different with destinations. If we're talking about Puerto Rico's gone through a lot in the last, as recently as a few months ago, the recurring earthquakes in the southwest of the island, which again was a localized thing, but they've just gone through a lot, and they've really worked hard to rebuild. And they've actually been very impressive in building up their sustainable tourism angle. And so to go now and to be part of something that's going to destroy that would be highly unethical, in my opinion. So I think that they did good in shutting down. And I think that they do that until things are under control again with the United States.
You mentioned doing research. What types of sources do you think travelers and should be looking for online to try to get a sense of whether sort of what the sort of open status is, or even what the sort of perception towards opening on the ground is?
Okay, so the different types of sources, right? So there's the being up to date with the protocols is important.
Okay.
And there's that list that I highly recommend from the Caribbean Hotel Tourism Association. They put together a really nifty, sort of Excel sheet with every single destination, what the latest protocol is, whether it's open or not. I think we had a link of it here, didn't we, David?
Yeah, let me look for that. If not, we'll send it out at the end. Okay. Yeah.
So that's a really handy list. Now, in terms of news,
I'll pull that up.
Look up the main outlets. The main news outlets in those destinations. They all have one, obviously, and just browse. Look at the headlines. Look at what's happening. Social media is full of. I don't really always rely on people who comment on social media. It's usually but just get a sense for things and consider the economic side as well, and consider the fact that you will be subject to the local protocol requirements and safety requirements. Obviously we're impact travelers. Obviously we respect what what the destination says we have to do, which is wearing masks, being tested before you go, and so on. So I think that that's one side of the consideration, and also consider the fact that this may not be this probably won't be the sustainable trip that you're used to, because I'm not one of those that says, oh, don't travel at all costs, because I think it depends. However, I will say don't go into the communities, for now, until this thing is really under control and gone, I don't recommend exposing yourself to locals as soon as you get off the plane. That's just highly irresponsible. So if you're going, you're going to have to keep to yourself most of the time. And, but you can stay in guest houses that have been approved, that are away from everyone. You can, and I know that some people are actually, I do know somebody who went to Aruba yesterday and is staying in an independently owned, locally owned little hotel, small hotel. But also in the touristy area, but close enough, but not right in the big resorts. So those options are there. you know, if that's one way to contribute. But in terms of, you know, roaming around freely, you know, that's not the time for that. It's really tough for me to say that, but it's
Yeah.
important because these you can't go there and overwhelm the health systems of the Caribbean, which are, as we know, varied. And so that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. And then obviously the other side of the decision, it will be case by case, you know, based on your personal circumstances.
Right.
Right. I mean, who do you live with, you know, right now? Are you coming back to are you coming back to your family? Are you coming back to an older relative? Are you, you know, all of these things are super important. And then, you know the healthcare systems and the destinations that you're going to, which is something that we never used to talk about, you know.
Yeah.
Vacation in the Caribbean all the time, but we have all read the occasional article where, you know, somebody gets seriously hurt and what happens, they don't have the coverage to get airlifted out because the Caribbean, the destination doesn't have the you know, the either the equipment or the staff or the surgeries
Or the
necessary.
beds. I mean, it's
Or
as
the
simple as
beds.
beds in ICU. I think that you know, just in St. Lucia, I think I think people don't might underestimate the or perhaps overestimate the resources, the healthcare resources in many of these islands. I was sharing with you the other day you know, this notion that in St. Lucia, I think if any complex surgery is needed, you're airlifted to Martinique, which is the nearest island, because they are, you know, they're a French state, and
Martinique has a
it's
strong health system because they're
really strong health system.
part
Yeah.
of France.
Yeah, but you think, and luckily St. Lucia has just gone through a transition from our old hospital to a brand new sort of EU-sponsored facility, which has vastly improved the healthcare system. The resources, at least from a physical hospital perspective, increasing the number of beds and facilities to take care of people. But, you know, I think that's an important thing to look at when you're going from
Absolutely. It's from now on, I mean, that's something you just can't just go willy-nilly and think and not know what's happening. And you have to have very good insurance, you know, as well as evacuation coverage. And you know, as you said, the health systems are very different. You know, the health system in Jamaica is not going to be the same as the one in Martinique or even the one in the Bahamas, which I think the Bahamas has fairly decent healthcare. And so those are things to consider. And who knows, you might just be locked away, you know, on lockdown. Who knows? I mean, we don't know. You could be on vacation and suddenly or taking your little break, you know, because everybody's super stressed out right now. And I've had people tell me, you know, I just have to go. Like, I really need to get away from the States, from the US. And so so they're going to go anyway. So they have to know what they're getting into, and they might potentially be stuck. I mean, maybe something happens in the US and they shut. I mean, we just don't know, you know. So do you have a plan B? You've got to have a plan B.
So we touched on a bunch of these things, and one other question I had for you is, what's the best way to travel? I know we touched about on, you know, not going into communities, et cetera. Are there any other things to consider if I'm decided to book a trip to the Caribbean from whichever destination where COVID is a risk?
So I guess I have a long list of advice, so you guys hang on. So first of all, you get pre-tested as close as possible to your departure date, right? I know that people are going to say pre-testing is not a guarantee. I totally agree. I mean, literally, you could be negative, get on a plane, and by the time you get off, you get tested again on arrival, and you could be negative, and 5 days later, you're in the destination still, and you're positive. So, but I'm just saying it's a must anyway. You've got to do it. Respect the local health protocols, obviously, you know, just follow directives. Do not immediately go. I've heard a story of a couple that was on vacation, and they literally went in St. Lucia, went to the hotel, dumped their bags, and was so excited. I don't know if they were excited or just reckless. They just left the hotel and went to the nearest local bar to you know, hang out and see where the party was at and whatever. No, that's not what we're doing right now. Not at all. And bring your own supplies. In other words, bring your own, sanitizing wipes, your gels and all of that stuff, your masks, and take all your garbage with you, please. Like, don't leave the plastic containers here. The Caribbean has enough problems with pollution and plastics. It was actually making huge progress before the pandemic hit. Not using straws anymore. Supermarkets are trying to not use plastic bags anymore, or giving out reusable bags. Now it's like we've regressed because of this pandemic. So I would say bring your supplies, even in terms of disposable or bamboo utensils. Remember the list that even Impact Travel Alliance shared, a really great list on the blog. Of ways you can travel and take things with you that are, that won't pollute the destination. Know what the health system looks like. We already talked about that. Remember that summer is hurricane season. And I say that not because I think hurricanes are going to hit, because it's very low probability. I got to tell you, I've lived here 15 years, and the only time I've ever been scared was when Irma and Maria hit, and that's super unusual. But it's there. Climate is changing, obviously, so keep that in mind and have a plan. Or if you're there and it's suddenly raining all day for 3 days, just know that it is what it is. And then don't rule out independent accommodations that have been vetted and that have been approved. And just if you do go, well, just limit your exposure. I can't stress that enough. Limit your exposure to locals, please. And call out bad practices. If you see somebody not doing it right or whatever, point it out, to someone in authority, so that could be under control and it won't happen again. So that's my advice.
And this is, I'm no doubt, I think most of the travelers and individuals here are definitely travel sort of ethically, but for the media out there who want to write to their broader audiences, especially if they have a mass tourism audience as well, especially if they have if you guys have a mass tourism audience, this might sound really simple, but as somebody who grew up in the Caribbean, treat the Caribbean and the destination like you treat your home. I think there is the potential tendency for mass tourism, and I'm not trying to generalize, but there's a possibility that mass tourism travelers, take advantage of the destination and don't think of it and hold it up to the same regard as they would their own shores. And
I said that the other day in a little video I did, that people see the people who travel mass tourism, they see the Caribbean as a commodity. The place where real people live. It's somebody's home. So that goes.
And that message alone, I think, you've got the practical list that you gave, but then also just philosophically thinking that, I think, is an important thing to do. Right.
So, and I think the other thing I want to say was, really study the places you're going to. Other than reading up on the news. Especially for the media, look up the geography of the places, because a lot of times there's this, mainstream media tends to really lump the Caribbean in one, one region, or one, as if it was one country, right? But it's not. And so, for example, places like the Dominican Republic has 11 million people. It's massive. It's massive. And we have huge cities, which are the ones that are struggling right now with this COVID virus, in addition to the fact that there was a switch in government. There is a current transition in government. So that's like the worst possible scenario for controlling a pandemic. However, where is it happening? Mostly in Santo Domingo, which is the capital and has a good chunk of the population living here and in its surroundings because of jobs. And then Santiago, which is the second largest city. So if you really look closely at the spread and the uncontrolled virus, then it is in those cities. And so you would avoid coming to those cities, but it's quite far away from, let's say, Samana Peninsula, which is, a good 3 hours north. or Puerto Plata, which is another 4.5 hours by road. So it's a huge island compared to, say, Antigua, Barbuda, St. Vincent, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different dynamics, So, consider all of that before you write about places. Avoid generic statements. It's the epicenter of the epidemic. Well, it's not the epicenter because why is it though? Why do they have more cases? Well, they have a larger population of 11 million people, So just details. We're going to have to be a lot more detailed and a lot more conscientious. And we're going to have to read up on the protocols every single day. And, as an editor, if you're asking a writer to write about the Caribbean right now, it's not possible to ask them to write about it without mentioning the elephant in the room, which is the pandemic. Like it's, I've had requests to write things in it, and a couple of weeks ago, and there was absolutely no mention of the pandemic. It was just sort of a dreamy piece about off the beaten track in the Caribbean, and I thought, wow. And I said no.
Yeah.
No, I turned it down. And I said, we're in a pandemic. Do you want me to I could do that. I could mention what's happening in some of these different places, but I'm not going to do a dreamy, head in the sand coverage. That's not happening. So keep that in mind. This is a place, like you said, that people have lives here, entire lives. Many of these people don't have the luxury of going abroad to get, all the latest medical technology and care.
Absolutely.
And so
I talk about airlifting people to Martinique, but that's just not many people can do that. I mean, it's
that's
obviously
that's a privilege.
Yeah, it's certainly very, very much of a privilege. So if we decide, or if I decide, or if a traveler decides, okay, the risk isn't worth it, the risk to me or the risk to the island isn't worth it, what can I or just travelers do to to support our favorite destinations if we decide to stay home?
Right. I think there are many ways, both monetary and non-monetary. First, I would say we really need more impact travelers to the Caribbean. Desperately. Please come to the Caribbean. There is sustainable tourism in the Caribbean. We need more of that, And so I actually launched an initiative last week called See the Caribbean. And the website is seethecaribbean.org. And it really is going to begin rolling out different stories from, of sustainable tourism stories from around the region to begin sort of, educating people and showing them the different ways that they can see the Caribbean away from of this image of mass tourism. So you can follow that. It's a movement. I like to call it a movement because really time we have this movement, the green movement.
Yeah.
And other ways, there are so many amazing organizations in the Caribbean, environmental organizations that are doing incredible work on the ground, even as this pandemic is going on, whether it's in marine conservation or wildlife conservation and, replanting corals and all of that good stuff. And so I think we're going to do like a follow-up after this of a post. And we can include some of those organizations. For those of you who can give a little, it goes a really long way. And then there are also schools that you can support, like the one that we've mentioned in this webinar, Ocean Academy High School in Belize, which really is training the future generation in becoming not just entrepreneurs, but also in many other industries, sustainable tourism, technology, artificial intelligence, like just amazing things. And so we really, that's a great way to support the Caribbean. And then last but not least, I would say boost the morale, of people in the Caribbean, because this is a very difficult, seriously, it's very difficult. There are people who are struggling to put food on the table. There are also people who just launched a business and just got stuck because nothing is happening, nothing is coming in, and there's no light. There seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel, but it is coming. And so the way you can do that, especially for the media out there, but even if you're a regular Caribbean traveler and love the Caribbean, share stories, you know, of some of your experiences in the Caribbean, tag the businesses that you've used. If you had a favorite tour guide, you know, in a particular place, you know, post their picture, you know, don't forget about that whole Instagram curated thing. I mean, this is a time when we really need to understand that it's about people, and it's about us connecting, and no one does it better than Impact Travelers. So boost the morale of these businesses, go online, leave them reviews, follow everyone's up to something. Maybe they're doing lives, maybe they're doing workshops, you know, share that on your social media, and just be a supportive that way too, you know.
Yeah, I think can't underestimate the need for sort of the support for recovery. I think once we do get to that point, when hopefully soon, when we can when we have to be less concerned about some of these things, because I think we're still in that time to have to do that. Just one, you know, tough question. I think, you know, we've talked a lot. We've talked a lot about you know, sort of the challenges and the sort of limitations. Is it, I guess folks might be wondering, is it worth going? Is it worth going to the Caribbean right now?
Oh, wow.
I know that's a very controversial question. I'd like to add a little bit of
I think it goes back to, you know, this is going to be a very individual case by case decision. I'm not going to say it's not worth it, because I'm not the one on the other side of the table in terms of having lost I have actually lost, as a travel journalist, I have lost a bit of income as well, you know, all of us in tourism, right? But the degree to which I've been affected is completely different from the degree to which someone who works for a resort has been affected. So I can't sit here, and who has a family, for example, or small kids, you know, so I really can't sit here and say, you know, point fingers, because I understand it. I understand that if I have to feed my kids, I'm going to be out there feeding my kids. And so if I want people to come so I can feed my kids, that's okay, you know, as long as they do it responsibly, and as long as they really take the measures seriously and respect the destination, respect the protocols, and keep to themselves, and really do all of the things we've been told to do every minute, you know, like, so I would say my answer is yes, if you can afford not to go. I mean, if you have other extenuating circumstances, then don't go. If you're high risk, definitely don't go. And be choosy, very, very choosy about your destination. What do you think?
Can't escape my own question. I think, you know, it's not that much more work to do a little bit more research to figure out how to do this right. It's not, and the experience isn't going to be a bad one. As somebody who is, you know, who takes a deep, you know, sigh of like relief when I land back home, when I go to St. Lucia. There's just so much of just being on that island that is beneficial. It may not include some of the things that you ideally would have liked to do. There is still so much to be experiencing, and just even to see and visualize. And while we so mentally and spiritually, I think there is benefit to travelers going. And while we do, and while we do talk about wanting to see communities and see, you know, do more than just, you know, sort of tick the box of countries going, I think that there is an emotional element that comes from it as well. And while we may not be able to do that now, I think that there is benefit to it. But again, just, you know, I echo what you say.
You're 100 spot on, because I couldn't wait to get back home. I mean, I was stuck in the US for 3 months, going on 4, and I came back to Santo Domingo, which is where I live, you know, here with my partner. So you know, being away from my home and just being away from the Caribbean for the first time in 15 years for 4 months was brutal.
I can imagine.
So as soon as the airport, you know, opened, I came down, but again,
Yeah.
I took all the measures and I self-quarantined, even though I wasn't
Yes.
required to. I did it.
And this is what we should be doing, even if we're traveling from, from New York City to upstate New York as well, or to Massachusetts or
Sure.
Maine, or traveling to Colorado. These are all the same. I think, again, I go back to echoing this notion of treat the Caribbean or treat the destination like
Yes.
you would your home.
Your home and not a commodity. Yeah.
Not
Totally.
a commodity. So we have about 10 minutes left. I sort of give it back to Kelly, see if we have any questions for
yeah.
Lily.
Thank you both so much. I know that's a ton to pack into a short amount of time. We could spend that hour even just on one of the countries in and of themselves. But you guys did an amazing job of covering a ton of different topics. We are going to open it up for Q&A. So if you guys have questions, feel free to put those into the Q&A chat box. I know that we have a couple that are trickling in already. Before we do, as Lily mentioned, she did a quick shout out for Ocean Academy, which is an award-winning high school that teaches kids trade skills and tourism, as well as general subjects. All of our events right now at Impact Travel Alliance are on a pay-what-you-can basis. And if you have paid for your tickets today, those are going toward Impact Travel Alliance, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And then we're also funding these at-need tourism projects around the world. And our goal is to be able to support tourism at a time when the industry is essentially at a standstill. So thanks, Lily, for recommending that nonprofit. And thank you everyone who has paid to be able to come to this event today. And then from here, in the Q&A, we have a couple of questions already. Kate asked, do you have any good recommendations to read to understand what's going on the ground?
Right, so this goes back to the to what David and I was saying, that you should read, depending on the destination you're going to, there will be at least one or two primary outlets, news outlets, to read the newsy side of what's happening with COVID. And there are books out there on Caribbean travel. I'm just not sure what, to understand what's going on the ground. Yeah. So news outlets, for sure. I mean, for example, for Jamaica, you have the Gleaner and the Observer are the two main, outlets. For Dominican Republic, you have Diario Libre. And you also have others that are more independent. So every destination will have, Barbados Today is the main one for Barbados. So every single destination will have a news outlet if you look online. And I'm sure when we do the follow-up post, we can also mention some of these for you with the links.
And one attendee asked if there's any Caribbean islands that don't require quarantine nor negative COVID test upon arrival. I know that does change on a day-to-day basis. So maybe instead of answering that, what are resources that a traveler could look for in order to check if they want to go to a destination? How do they figure out what their quarantine or rules are?
So that's the link that I shared with David from.
I'm gonna copy it now and post it in.
A really great resource from the Caribbean Hotel Tourism Association. They're keeping this up to date quite rapidly, and they list all the destinations, including detailed protocols for each. So if you could just, you could, and it's free for all to view and save. So just save it and look it up when you need it. Another resource would be, again, news outlets. Tourism boards are not as fast with sharing information because they have to go through several protocols themselves to publish press releases and so on. But that's also another source to go to. And of course, the Caribbean journalists keep tabs on this, and there's a bunch of us, and we could also include that information in the post.
And Todd asked, what are Caribbean air transport providers doing in order to instill confidence in traveling to the destination?
Well, Delta is still blocking middle seats, which is pretty impressive. Yeah, I flew Delta down 3 weeks ago. And they give out, if you don't have them, they give out masks and a wipe, sanitizing wipe. They give out snacks in sealed bags. They definitely, masks are mandatory in the airport, and boarding, I saw even like police officers making sure that everyone is boarding with a mask on. And Delta is this is one thing they did that really impressed me, was the boarding process is from the back to front. So it didn't matter where, if you're first class, you can board anytime, but if you're not, it doesn't matter. You have to wait for the back to the front. And that meant that we were never crowded. You barely waited for anyone to sit down. Another thing they did was when we were disembarking, you have to wait for the row in front of you to have taken down their items from the overhead and completely walked away before you get to come out of your seat. So I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, so it never felt close to anyone, really. So that was good. I don't know about the other airlines, but I have heard some slight horror stories.
Just to add to that response, if you're traveling point to point from an international destination to the Caribbean, you're usually going to find the national carriers, and so you can check their websites and for how they're treating travel. So the U.S. Delta, United, American, JetBlue. Canada would be WestJet, Air Canada. UK, BA, Virgin, Air France, Caribbean. Carib Airways from or Air Caribe from France. So just basically check your destination or your point of origin for the flight policies, and you'll be able to find that.
Yes.
And I'm going to wrap this up with one last question from Kirsten. She said, Lily, do you know any travel advisors based in the Caribbean that specialize in helping people plan responsible tourism within the region for supporting businesses that maybe aren't as savvy as marketers or as easy to find online?
Kirsten, no. Everything that I have built in the last 15 years has been through colleagues in different destinations, and finding these experiences by myself and connecting with people by myself. So there is no such thing, and that's why I really created that platform of See the Caribbean, was really to bring us together. We need to come together, those of us who support a green Caribbean, and we need to share resources, and we need to be collaborative. And so that's really what I'm trying to do, even in terms of my media friends in different destinations, in Martinique or in Guadeloupe, Puerto Rico. I have a couple of folks who are, social entrepreneurs who we collaborate. And so that's really very grassroots so far. And that's why that needs to change. That's a really good question. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. These events, they always fly by. I'm posting a link in the chat right now with our Facebook group. It's facebook.com/group/Impact Travel Alliance. In a couple of moments, I will post a thread in there so that we can keep the conversation going. If you want to ask any more questions, or if you want to share feedback or ideas or just conversation starters, we always try to keep the conversations going online after the event itself. And with that, thank you all for coming. And I do want to just pass it back off to Lily and David, if there's anything else that you guys want to add or close on to leave with us today.
I just want to say, keep dreaming, keep dreaming about the Caribbean. It's going to be back, and it's going to be back,
Absolutely.
But we've got to do it better together. That's my message.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better. So
Thanks.
Have the last word.
Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, David. That was really great.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.